Our world is transforming faster than ever. Dynamic landscapes, changing energy needs. Now more than ever, it's key to recognize the revolutionary role that digitalization and AI will play in the energy transition journey. From machine learning to data-driven insights, augmented reality to digital twins, autonomous vehicles to robotics. How can we harness technologies to build energy systems that are safer, more sustainable and efficient? With Shell E4, we combine Shell's expertise with trailblazing ideas from world-class startups in India to inspire amazing innovations and breakthroughs. When we join forces, we can solve any challenge. We can make the world we live in better, cleaner and greener. Together, we can power progress. Welcome to Shell E4 Demo Day.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Shell E4 Demo Day 2022, a celebration of energy and entrepreneurial ecosystem. I'm your host for today, Piyush Bagri, Investment Associate at Shell in E4 India, and I'll be hosting this session for you covering energy entrepreneurship. We have such an exciting agenda today. You can hear to expect from the global leaders of the energy ecosystem and who's who, from the venture capitalists to startup founders and numerous corporate leaders from the ecosystem. We have also invited you to submit your most pressing questions in the box located next to this video player. Before we move ahead, first things first, which is safety. Your safety is very important to us. Please ensure that you have an upright posture that is comfortable to you and you maintain social distance. We also recommend you adjust your volume so that you are able to hear the alarms in case of an emergency, and make sure that you're aware of the emergency exits close to you in case of an eventuality. So without any ado, let's get started. I would first like to introduce Ms. Pratibha Priyadarshini, Vice President Human Resources at Shell India, to deliver the official welcome note, and Yuri, Executive Vice President of Technology and CTO, who will be joining us all the way from Shell Netherlands to deliver the opening address for today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Day 2 of the Shell E4 Demo Day 2022. I'm sure that you would agree that some of the best ideas come from working together. At Shell E4, it is our constant endeavor to keep the spirit of collaboration going by augmenting synergies between corporate world and the startup ecosystem. These partnerships enable energy entrepreneurs to bring some remarkable solutions to life, and they allow us to accelerate our united journey towards a cleaner, safer, and smarter energy future. Now, we understand, of course, that the critical role of digital technology and how it plays up in this journey. It's key that we leverage digital technology trends to innovate, explore, and refine solutions. And in doing so, we have the potential to make significant breakthroughs and create meaningful impact. Now, transformation, of course, takes place when bright minds, digital technology, and the challenge of a common aim of creating exceptional business value. In Shell E4, we seek to provide this common platform to aspiring and promising energy entrepreneurs. Our aim is to broaden the spectrum of opportunities available to them, providing the experience, expertise, infrastructure, and all actions that are required to achieve their bold ideas. So I invite you today to come partake of activities planned at the E4 Demo Day. Let the challenge begin.
Welcome to the E4 Demo Day and the second day of the proceedings this year. My name is Yuri Sebrecht and I'm Shell's Chief Technology Officer. At past events of the E4 Demo Day, I was able to be there in India in person. This year, that didn't work out with the schedule, and therefore there is this recorded message to you. I hope in future I'll be able to be with you physically again. The E4 Demo Day has become one of the largest events for energy entrepreneurship in India, and we're very proud of that. And my gratitude is very large for all the colleagues at Shell who make the event so successful, and of course, very, very much also for our partners who are working with us and to all of you for being here and make the event successful together with us. This year's theme is energy entrepreneurship. And energy entrepreneurship is going to be core and critical to the success of the energy transition and the digital transformation that we are all living through, and that is so essential for the future of our planet. The planet needs both more and cleaner energy for a successful future, and achieving both goals, more and cleaner at the same time, is really, really hard. That requires breakthrough technologies to not only be developed, but also brought to market and deployed. Whilst that is hard, that of course also creates a very large area of opportunity. And where there's opportunity, there's entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs who are creative, who have new ideas, and who have the energy to bring their idea to full fruition and deployment in society. And we're very proud that the E4 program, which we started a number of years ago now, I think the first year was 2018 that we had an event like this, has already yielded many successes in this space. We've now worked with more than 35 startup companies, had close working relationships between Shell teams and the entrepreneurs, founders, and their teams to really help them bring the idea to full fruition. And in several cases, we are at a stage that those entrepreneur teams are deploying their technologies also at Shell assets. Just a few weeks ago, for instance, a technology called T-Pulse from Detect, which is a digital application to use all kinds of data and sensors in an industrial environment to detect hazards and dangerous situations and to intervene, was tested at one of our catalyst plants at Port Allen in Louisiana, US, very, very successfully, if I may say so. So this is a great example of how a large corporation and a startup can come together, and they can reinforce each other and bring the technology to full scale up, benefiting our own operations and benefiting the startup through working together. There's many other examples. I made a little list here. We have startups working in mobility solutions, in energy management, clean technology, energy, IoT applications, digital solutions, logistics, and waste to value. And I'm sure that there's going to be more areas of great opportunity to work through. So with all of that in mind, I wish all of you a very inspirational day. I wish that you'll be able to make new contacts between startups and corporates and with investors, and that new wonderful successes will come out of this. Thank you very, very much for being with us today, and a warm welcome again, and enjoy the day. Thank you.
Very inspiring conversations to start another day full of entrepreneurship. And to keep the momentum rolling, let's welcome an illustrious alum of Shell E4, Energos.ai. A brief about Energos. Energos.ai is an open platform with Edge AI for retailers to become energy operators. The company has operations sprawling across the United States, Australia, Southeast Asia, and India. And today we'll have a chance to hear from the horse's mouth on how Energos and Shell are collaborating together to drive change and energy transition. Right from Rajesh Solanki, founder of Energos, and Sanjay Waki, director of Shell Mobility India. Over to you.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Waki, General Manager Mobility for Shell in India. And with me, I have Rajesh, the founder of Energos. And we have been undertaking an incredible journey. And before I ask Rajesh a couple of questions, Rajesh, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Sanjay. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you, E4 team, for having me here. Energos is a unified device-agnostic data platform for distributed energy. And we are very excited about where the grid going distributed and computing and AI being distributed, how they can intersect and how they can help to accelerate the energy transition.
True. And as we've discussed, Rajesh, we're growing our network. And with that, we're going to have almost 1,200 sites with an integrated NFR or non-fuel retail proposition and an e-mobility services platform and proposition. So, like we've discussed, digital transformation and reducing carbon footprint is critical for us. Would you like to share how you found that overlap with us in the initial discussions?
Yeah. Let's break the fuel station in 5 components. First is your conventional fuel systems, which are existing today. Second is the new low carbon fuel systems that you're going to add. Third is the electric mobility systems with the storage and the fast chargers and PV systems that you're going to add. So that's 3. Fourth is the convenience store, because it's going to be the more important part of your future business plan. And fifth is everything around the forecourt, including your display lighting and the forecourt lighting, the electrical, the backup power, stuff like that. All of this for us is a data point. And what we did in the pilot with Shell is to gather more than 70 to 100 data points from each fuel station. And that's what digitalization means. So it starts with data gathering and then builds all the complaint handling, alarm management, and then optimizing the entire operation and maintenance of the fuel station, reducing the downtime and increasing the uptime, then building energy efficiency and water efficiency into the solution, and thereby reducing the carbon footprint.
And I recall actually we started with water efficiency, Rajesh, but the scope of IoT solutions spreads so rapidly and so quickly and can be so innovative in reducing cost and utility consumption and our carbon footprint. But how have you found the working relationship with mobility and therefore, in some ways, Shell and Shell E4?
E4 has been excellent, right? In terms of corporate accelerator, you cannot ask for a better accelerator, I would say. And we at Enogos, we've spent time with a couple of accelerators. So the water problem that you mentioned was a water challenge, and Enogos was one of the winners of the water challenge. And it was the start of building the entire solution and building the whole use case for Shell Retail. E4 was instrumental in connecting us with the retail business team. And then it has been a very, very satisfying collaboration over 1.5 to 2 years, where we did the first pilot, then that multiplied into 20 pilots, building the use case on the go. And now it has resulted in a very forward-thinking deployment on 200 fuel stations.
And you talk about use cases, Rajesh. Talk us through, how that discussion flowed, because in that, I guess, lies the real gist of what we are trying to drive, isn't it?
Certainly. So as Shell, as a large retailer who wants to be at the forefront of energy transition, digitalization is one of your key goals. Carbon reduction is another key goal. And as a digital platform, what we want to do is help retailers like yourself to digitalize and to reduce the carbon footprint. So the way the use case is built is on defining the problem. What is the real problem that you want to solve, whether it is in your conventional fuel systems, whether there's not enough data, whether it's data is there, but it's not remotely available. Who is the owner of that data? Is it the equipment OEM or is it Shell as a retailer? And our goal through our platform is to enable a retailer like yourself to own the data from all the varied equipments.
And you've talked about the whole efficiency piece. Could you just talk us through optimized asset utilization and predictive maintenance?
Yeah, so on efficiency, there are three value sets, right? One is the energy efficiency, and HVAC and lighting loads are flexible loads where you can, reduce the maximum demand, reduce the energy consumption, and have savings in your energy bill and equivalent savings in scope 2 carbon emission reduction. Similarly, like water, you can reduce the consumption and remove wastage from the entire consumption cycle to achieve savings in water. The third is the operations and maintenance efficiency, where you can automate the complaint handling and the alarm management, and you can use AI to create auto tickets so that the time required to respond to a downtime is shrunk. Also, then you can go into predictive modeling and actually reduce the number of downtimes because you are able to predict an event and so respond to it in advance. All of this is supposed to help us, or help Shell rather, to deliver a more enhanced customer experience to the new mobility customer.
And at the back end, Rajesh, we've talked about evolving use cases, especially when we have different sources of energy, solar, at our own sites, renewable kind of storage systems. What and how do you see your solution actually enabling us make this difference?
Yeah. We see distributed energy as an ecosystem, because distributed energy means the buyer is also the seller, or the retailer can sell electricity and buy electricity, right? So the whole ecosystem must have easy connections with the consumer, with aggregators, with the utilities, and that needs easy APIs from the data system. That needs control of the data. That needs intelligence on the edge where each distributed source of energy or set of equipments is. And that's what we want to bring to Shell.
Rajesh, thanks so much. Fascinating, and it's so critical that we continue to pay close attention to the advancements, and especially in the startup ecosystem with entrepreneurs like you, because you're going to help Shell in not just its value constellation, but in its transition to a net zero company. Thanks so much. And if you'd like to sign off with any last words, over to you.
My very best wishes to all the fellow entrepreneurs who are in the E4 ecosystem. We are all indeed very fortunate to be able to work with a large customer like Shell. I would end this with a few suggestions to all the startups. First, when we are in the energy business, we should be clear which game we are winning, what is the game we are playing, and accordingly have the mission, and then stay very focused on it. Working with large companies like Shell needs a lot of patience, a lot of deliberation, a lot of interaction, and in many ways we do get challenged, but it's all worth it. And all the very best to every entrepreneur in E4. Thank you.
It was a pretty interesting conversation between Rajesh and Ajay. Entrepreneurship, startups, energy transition, all the three most important pillars that define the Demo Day 2022. And that's what takes us to the next fireside chat, Tech Pictures of the Future. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Mr. Ajay Mehta, VP Technology, Marwal Ansari, GM, Long Range Research, Cyril Lee, co-founder, Third Derivative, and joining them is Dan Jeevans, VP Digitalization and Computational Science at Shell. The session will be moderated by Amy LaFleur from the Long Range Research team. We would love for you to leave your most pressing questions in the box next to the video player.
Welcome to Shell E4 Demo Day. We're in the second day of this exciting event, and this year Shell.ai is very excited to be partnered with E4 and bring to you this panel discussion titled Tech Pictures of the Future. Today's Demo Day theme is Energy Entrepreneurship, which is an interesting collision of themes that we're seeing new and innovative energy solutions from hard tech, soft tech, and new business models, seeking fresh ideas and mindsets to create the future of energy. My name is Amy Lafleur. I lead Shell's early stage investment fund, and I have the pleasure of moderating our panel that will touch on the future of energy. But before we dive in, I'd like us all to have a safety reminder. Please ensure you're aware of your surroundings and have a plan and an exit route in case of emergency. Thank you. Now, as I was saying, energy entrepreneurship, it's the lifeblood of how we're going to find the solutions necessary to meet our climate ambitions. Given the complexity of the energy system, it is difficult to say what the future of energy will look like and where we should focus our efforts. But through this panel discussion today, we'd like to touch on this topic, provide some insights and signals to guide us. So let's dive in and let me introduce our panel. First, our non-Shell colleague, Cyril Yee. Cyril has held a number of positions in the clean tech and investment industries. He's currently founding a stealth direct air capture startup. And most recently, he was the founder and chief innovation officer for Third Derivative, which is a global climate tech accelerator which found, funded, and scaled up some of the world's most promising technologies to achieve larger and faster reductions in global carbon emissions. Welcome, Cyril.
Hello.
Next,
Thanks.
yeah, thank you. Next, I'd like to include my esteemed colleague, Ajay Mehta. Ajay serves as the Vice President, Engineering Technology and Chief Engineer R&D for Shell. He also heads Shell's Technology Center Bangalore, leading a team of global scientists and engineers dedicated to providing deep subject matter expertise and innovative engineering solutions across the energy value chain in upstream, downstream, integrated gas, and new energies. Welcome, Ajay.
Thanks, Amy.
And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Dan Jevons, VP of Digital Technology at Shell, also based in our Technology Center in Bangalore. Dan has been a key contributor to Shell's digitalization program. He's been recognized for his industry-leading work in the area of digital transformation, all while developing effective technology partnerships with Microsoft, Baker Hughes, and C3.ai. He's part of the Shell.ai, which is now externally recognized, and the work of his team and their impact has been regularly publicized in mainstream journals like Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times. Welcome, Dan. Good to
Thanks
have
for
you
having
here.
me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So thanks, panel, for agreeing to be under the spotlight to share your thoughts. So let's dive in. I thought we'd start with some broad strokes, better understand what our future might hold. So from where you sit, what emerging investment trends are you seeing in the energy sector? Cyril, I'll start with you. What are you seeing these days?
Yeah, thank you. We changed. It's just a lot more capital flowing into the space. And secondly, it's flowing into different areas. Maybe 5 years ago, most of the money was flowing into software or business model innovation, and hardly anything was going into hardware or deep tech. And that's very much changed as well. We're seeing a lot of investments in hard things like direct air capture, hydrogen, etc. And thirdly, there was probably good reasons for it not to have a lot of investment 5 years ago because the market conditions were really bad. And 95% of climate investments in, let's say, 2010 did not even return their initial capital. So the world's really changed in terms of the market prospects for climate investments. You see things like the Inflation Reduction Act here in the US, the war in Ukraine, forcing Europe to go into renewables. You've got technological changes in, the adoption of EVs and cheap renewables, changing the power grid. So we're seeing once in a generation or once in a lifetime market forces, which are really making these investments viable now for the first time.
Great point, Cyril. No, that's so true. Ajay, do you agree, or how do you feel from Shell's point of view as well?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Cyril just mentioned, that certainly we're seeing a very visible shift. In the past, a lot of the venture money in particular was, focused much more on the digital clean tech solutions. And of course, an enormous amount of capital still flows in that direction, and rightly so, because certainly in our energy sector also, the digital theme, we have just barely scratched the surface. Other industries are far ahead in the deployment of tools which are already available and off the shelf, but we have been much slower in our industry sector. So certainly I think there's ample opportunity in the energy sector for more deployment-based innovation, and you are seeing a lot more of that also coming in the clean tech sector. But as a trend, also seeing a lot more investment finally going in the hard engineering side, like the example that Cyril just mentioned in areas like DAC, like going after sustainable aviation fuels. But also I see kind of a bifurcation in terms of global trends versus regional trends. Globally, of course, you continue to see that there is investment dollars going after next generation of wind turbines. The pace at which floating wind might actually take off. What's the next generation of more efficient solar going to look like? Pretty much every government these days has their own national program on hydrogen. So you see a lot of kind of clean tech money also being invested in that space. But then at a regional basis, also you see some differentiation. Here in India, for example, there's a lot more focus on clean electricity production. So you're seeing kind of investment dollars going into grid management services and EV charging in particular, biofuels and second-gen biofuels in particular. So there are kind of some macro trends, which are kind of globally trending in a certain way with investment dollars following. But then there are also some other micro trends that you see which are much more regional in scope.
Oh, thanks for that, Ajay. Yeah, I think Cyril, Ajay, you guys kind of touched on the hard tech, which we've seen really take off the past few years, which is great. Really need those extra investment dollars. Dan, I know you're going to bring up digital. It's still an enabler. How do you feel like digital and AI plays into the story?
Yeah, well, I always say I'm biased, but I will say I agree with Ajay and Cyril that look, the hard tech is becoming more important, and maybe to bridge there, I think what's really interesting that we're seeing in digital right now is really a convergence of the physical and the digital. Historically, digital has been largely data-driven, right? So if you look at the models that we were deploying in Shell a few years ago, it was really taking large volumes of data and looking for anomalies or trying to classify things more effectively. And I call that sort of Gen 1 of the AI revolution. And I think we've seen that in for example, the big tech companies where this has been rolled out pretty extensively. We've seen it in the startup world where we've seen some very successful startups, scale up what I call Gen 1 AI. But just like we see sort of Gen 2 in areas like biofuels, I would also argue we're seeing Gen 2 in digital, where people are recognizing that you can't simply scale on the back of purely data-driven models. You need to bring in the physics. You need to bring in the environmental context. You need the data associated with those things. And so I think there's going to be a whole nother wave of AI around the confluence of physical and digital. And there's no sort of greater area where we see that than in the world of digital twins. So digital twins are now the buzzword that everyone's talking about. And for me, the digital twin is not just about a pretty visualization of the asset. It's about combining the full digital context of the asset to actually build the asset digitally before we develop it physically, and then to use that to develop the asset and its performance. And we're experimenting with that in Shell already. We've done some fantastic work in areas like LNG Canada, where we're really looking to develop the digital twin in advance of the facility being ready. But I think there's a long, long way to go. I think we haven't even scratched the surface in the potential. I think the final thing I would say is that edge computing is going to be huge. So as we look at this converged physical and digital reality, we're going to be talking a lot more about edge compute versus cloud compute. And I think just to maybe link to another trend, that also, of course, takes us into the world of Web3, where all of a sudden we're starting to see that the future of the internet is probably more decentralized than centralized. And tools like blockchain are going to play a critical role in helping us to manage a decentralized system. And maybe to bring all that together, I think the thing about all of that is, of course, that if you think about the energy system, it matches very closely what's happening in digital. So the energy system of the future is going to be more distributed, more complex, and more diverse. And as a result, there is a very strong need for this sort of technology to be developed. And so, just to summarize all of that, what I see is innovation in hardware, physical and digital coming together, distributed diverse energy system requiring a distributed diverse digital ecosystem along the lines of Web3. And so my own view is that actually energy has the opportunity to be one of the leaders in adopting Web3 technology. And I think it's never been more important because that can really help us in accelerating energy transition.
Thanks, Dan, for tying that all together for us. I'm starting to see the future and how these technologies come into play. So now that, we've talked about these trends, what bets would you place on the future? Like, we've heard a lot of, technology buzzwords, if you will, within this conversation. But if there's an area that stands out that you think the future is critical, maybe we can go around and share your thoughts. Cyril, what do you think? What bet would you place on these trends?
Yeah, there's so many potentially good and interesting ones. A couple that I like is, kind of mentioned it before, but with the war in Ukraine, European gas prices are shooting through the roof, futures of $50 per million BTU, et cetera. And I think we need new solutions for industrial heat, and we're at the right timing for new solutions for industrial heat. So industrial heat is about 10% of global emissions, and a lot of it's being done with natural gas right now. And there are new technologies such as, heat pumps, solar, et cetera, which could potentially reduce that. And absolutely, it's needed in places like Europe and other places. Maybe a little less so in North America. The other one that I really like, which I think Shell is actually well suited for, is we're seeing a lot of work in carbon capture. We're seeing a lot of work in hydrogen. I don't think we've got good solutions to decarbonize aviation, long-haul shipping, et cetera. And I do believe that hydrocarbons are going to be, a part of the future. But they don't have to be fossil hydrocarbons that come from underground. You can combine that hydrogen and that CO2 and make hydrocarbons using like the Fischer-Tropsch process, in which Shell's an expert in, et cetera. So I would like to see more work on how do we make, synthetic plastics, how do we make synthetic fuels, et cetera.
Thanks, Cyril. Ajay, what stands out to you?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with kind of building on the last one that Cyril just mentioned. I mentioned briefly around sustainable aviation fuels, and that's certainly an area that, just 5 years ago, people would have dismissed it off as science fiction and said, yeah, it's never going to happen. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. But here you are today, and you find that more and more people are actually not only talking about it, but doing something about it. And more importantly, there's a customer out there who is willing to pay the price, recognizing that the first generation of SAF will be coming in at a price point which will be 3 to 4 or 5x higher than conventional fuels cost right now. But that's really what it's going to take to kind of have that spark that then enables us to kind of kick in the economies of scale, because all of the component parts that go into it, whether it be the generation of green hydrogen, or even going further upstream, the green electricity that you need based on low-cost renewables to be able to make green hydrogen, or capture technologies to get CO2 either out of the atmosphere or point sources, but again, getting it at a price point that is competitive. I think those are arenas in which the time is ripe to double down actually on investments. And we are seeing, again, a number of large corporations, but also importantly, smaller companies and startups getting behind this. And the more ideas that we have going into this space, the better it is. But beyond SAF, there are like 3 other areas that I also kind of find very interesting. And especially if I think now a little bit more from a regional lens, since for the past year I've been physically here in India, is I do see a tremendous promise for second and third gen biofuels. I was in Brazil just a couple of weeks ago, and just seeing the Brazilian model of how they have transformed the whole market for ethanol generation with sugarcane as the feedstock. Very similar trends. We should be able to replicate some of those in the Indian subcontinent to provide, again, decentralized sources of producing liquid fuels. The second kind of broad trend that I still see here, which is again ripe for investment, is in the hard-to-abate sector. Again, in this area of the world, especially with cement and steel manufacturing, and these are massive in terms of the CO2 footprint. Almost 30% of the footprint globally comes in from this hard-to-abate sector. So that's, again, a sector which is prime for innovation and for substantial, changes, disruptive, technologies that can completely change the game. And again, I think we are pretty well positioned to play a pretty significant role in that arena. And the last piece that I would add is around circularity and waste management. That's another area where we are seeing a lot of investment dollars coming in, but the collection part is the hardest part. And then how do you ensure that you can work with different levels of contamination in that waste stream so that you can have a feedstock which can be used to convert it eventually into a fuel. So those are broad trends that I see a tremendous amount of promise, which will likely take off in the next 5 to 10 years in a pretty significant way.
Yeah, thanks, Ajay. I think you hit the key on the hard to abate and the need to find solutions to really hard problems. The future is going to be depending on that. And I think, Cyril, you're mentioning heat. I think that is really starting to be a hot topic, if you will, across all of the world right now, and how we can get some innovative solutions there. Dan, what if you could pick a couple, and maybe on the digital side or how you see it, what do you think?
Well, I want to link back to some of the examples that Ajay and Cyril gave, because I think one of the things from a digital perspective is one of the key areas I think digital can help is actually helping to accelerate the development of some of these technologies. And I think there are two key ways that can happen. I think the first is by using digital technology to accelerate the development of these sorts of physical technologies, for example, using simulation and digital twins, which I alluded to, and I'll come back to that in a second. The other area, I think, which is really important, is creating economic incentives to accelerate the development of some of these new technologies. And again, I'll just make that really specific so that those points sort of come across. If you look at the example that Cyril talked about of Fischer-Tropsch, of course, he's exactly right. This is an area where Shell has a lot of expertise. What he may not be aware of is, of course, that we have been developing solar fuels in our lab environment in Amsterdam. In fact, so much so that we developed 500 liters of the stuff, which we were then able to use to fly an aeroplane from Amsterdam down to Madrid. So that's an example of how we are taking concentrated stream CO2, pushing it through the Fischer-Tropsch process and ending up with synthetic kerosene, which of course can then be used as sustainable aviation fuel. The opportunity for digital, though, is of course the challenge is it's very different between doing it in a lab environment versus doing it at scale. And so the question is, how can you either develop new or convert existing infrastructure to actually be able to do that at scale? And so, of course, digital can help us in that design process through simulation, through optimization, to find ways of doing that more cost effectively and also to make better design choices. And in fact, that's exactly what we're doing. So we're actually leveraging already our internal modeling and digital capability to help us to scale up those technologies. So that's one area. The second area is around how do you create economic incentives? And here, I think tokenization has a key role to play. So earlier this year, together with our partners at Accenture and Amex Business Travel and also Energy Web Foundation, we developed a new blockchain solution called Avelia. And Avelia is designed to create a new demand signal for sustainable aviation fuel. Now, how does that work? Well, what we do is we effectively provide a view of this of the supply for sustainable aviation fuel to our partners. So effectively, we're saying to the likes of Accenture in this case and other partners too, we're putting 1 million liters of SAF into the, if you like, into the product. And that allows them to say, if that's available, we are willing to pay additional cost, which then reduces the cost of this for the airlines. So effectively, it works like a credit. It's a book and claim system. So we can show that the airline consumed the SAF that we're putting into Avelia. And the customer pays the delta, effectively subsidizing the cost for the airline of procuring the sustainable aviation fuel. Now, why is that important? It's important because what that does is it's creating a true signal of how much SAF the customers are willing to pay for. And they can upload their full SAF demand into the tool, which is then helping us to understand how much supply supply we need to build out. Because indeed, as Ajay was saying, it's a bit of a catch-22 that had developed in this space, which is we didn't know how much to produce. This is creating that signal to help us understand how much to produce and also to reduce the burden of cost on the airlines. Now, you can see how this sort of model could apply in many, many other places as well, where you can actually share the cost between the supply chain and the end customer to help to decarbonize the entire end-to-end process. And of course, that's what we're looking at. But I think those are two key areas that I can point to: accelerating the design of the new energy system and also creating economic incentives that I think digital can play a critical role in providing.
Oh, thanks, Dan. That's a great example too. Yeah, I think it's interesting in how all these technologies need to come together and to create these new trends and head towards the future. It's it's a lot of collaboration to do and get it together. Now, speaking of that, how are we going to create these new technologies and solutions? How do we bring startups into this? Because I think, we all agree that startups are bringing fresh ideas and working with corporations and trying to scale up technology. How do you feel startups play a role, Cyril? I'm sure you have a great perspective from Third Derivative.
Yeah, I think in climate tech and in the energy transition, you really need a collaboration between startups and large corporations. It's not like in social media and such where, startups could come in, get massive scale and recreate the world. They really need access to massive amounts of capital and, the markets and et cetera, which the incumbent corporations already have. The startups, I believe, really can bring in a lot of innovation into the space. It's hard for corporations themselves to be very innovative in this space for a number of reasons. One is they already have businesses here, and it's hard, you have the risk of cannibalization. So there's a cultural aversion to that. And secondly, a lot of corporations over the last 10, 20 years have really slashed their R&D budget significantly. So their innovation pipelines are somewhat bare. And so there's a lot of innovations happening at universities and startups. And I think corporations like Shell and others are starting to look outside of themselves for that kind of innovation, or the open innovation platform. You're seeing more and more corporate venture capital funds being set up, and you're seeing more and more collaborations and partnerships with startups. So I think it's a combination of the two that's really important and will be the most powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Cyril. Ajay, how is Shell working with startups, or how do you feel Shell's been empowering startups recently?
Yeah, no, thanks, Amy. I think we are doing much better, now than when we were in the earlier stage of this whole game, and we were just kind of learning how to work with the external community. Because historically, in a company like ours, which has had a very rich history of innovation within our sector, historically we've done most of the innovation in-house. But in the brave new world that we are entering into, as Cyril pointed out, there isn't enough money to go around, and there isn't enough time or enough bandwidth, to basically do everything internally. And so we've got to kind of tap into the brightest minds that are outside, if you're going to be successful in the energy transition. And I'm really happy to see how we have gone about it. I think within our sector, we have perhaps been the pioneers with coming up with different models, whether it be our game changer mechanism to put in seed money into really early stage innovative companies and ideas with kind of virtually no strings attached, just to kind of give incentives to companies to think beyond the traditional boxes that one might find oneself confined to, or the ventures group, which started out very much investing in more traditional, conventional oil and gas type of companies, but which has made a significant pivot in the clean tech space. And then the model that, I think for me has been an exemplar of what we can do when we put our minds to it is the partnership that we built with NREL. For example, with the Game Changer Powered by NREL program, to me is a classic example of trying to bring the best of all worlds, where Shell can provide its deep knowledge and expertise in the scale-up side. Your area, Amy, in the process development, well, is perhaps one of the least understood within the startup community, if I'm brutally honest about it, because oftentimes, a lot of people have the assumption that once the innovation is done, then the scale up is just a matter of time, or just kind of a linear process, and it's anything but that. And we've of course learned those lessons the hard way. So how do we kind of support companies which have brilliant ideas, but which sometimes might get lost or fall through the cracks, by providing that deep knowledge and expertise. And this is what it would take to vet your technologies. This is how you would do the scale up, and I think that's the kind of deep knowledge and expertise that only companies like Shell and others can provide. And I think that the GCXN model has been very successful, where you have a national lab that's able to provide you, with its knowledge, tools, and capabilities and expertise. Shell with not just necessarily the funding, but also the know-how on the scale-up side. And that in there is a winning formula. And so I'm seeing similar models now being replicated also here in the Indian ecosystem with E4, and Dan probably has some, examples also in there of companies that were seeded there, which have actually become, very successful in the next steps as they kind of gauge a broader market in this arena. So I think there's a role to play for us where it can turn out to be a very good synergistic relationship that can be a win for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Ajay. No, it's good that Shell can share our lessons learned on scale up that we've had over the many years and help get these smaller, innovations up to the scale that we need to fight the climate change battle. But Dan, do you have any examples of some startups that we worked with that kind of shed some light on what we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I want to start with a bit of humility. I think, as Ajay alluded to, we've had a lot of things that haven't gone quite so well in this space. But of course, we have had some that have gone well. I started working in 2014 with a little company called Databricks. And they did quite well in the end, and we've scaled them up within Shell, and now deployed them at scale across the organization, and they're providing the foundational technology that really underpins the majority of our data platforms. So that's one example. Of course, there are others, and perhaps closer to the energy sector's core, and indeed ones that have worked very well with E4. I know that Daniel and Detect are going to be coming and talking here around some of the work that they've been doing and some of the scale that they've achieved. And I think Detect is a great example of what E4 can do. They started off as a small company. We took T-Pulse, we deployed it initially to the Pennsylvania chemicals plant. We've scaled it to many other facilities now as well. And of course, they've gone through from E4 into actually being a full-fledged Shell venture with Shell Investment. And I think those sorts of examples are really powerful around not just the potential, but also the way in which that synergistic relationship can exist between Shell getting significant benefit by scaling the technology that the startup provides, and also us coaching the startup through the ventures rounds to turn them into a scaled up organization. And I think there are many other examples like that within Shell where we've gone through that process with the startups. I will say it's normally not easy. It takes time. There's normally scars along the way. But I think we're getting a lot better, as Ajay said, at doing that. And, the technology that Detect provides now is really one of our core safety platforms, providing alerting and preventing people getting injured in asset management and in projects. And I think, it's great to see how a startup that started really, really small can now have global potential to really solve some very, very tough problems. And we see the same happening, in energy transition and many of the startups that we're working with there. And I've just come back from Web Summit, where we took 30 startups this year to Lisbon to showcase what they're doing in the energy sector and the impact that they collectively are having. And I think, what was amazing about that was the reaction from both the startups themselves and also the people that came past the Shell booth, just seeing the fact that, oh, look, Shell is actually stitching together these different capabilities, which are all driving the impact in terms of energy transition. And actually look how these different capabilities can be stitched together and how that works closely with the technology that Shell's developing. And I thought it was just a really powerful picture of how we're changing as an organization, and also the way in which startups are playing a critical role in helping us to change.
Oh, thanks, Dan. No, that's a great example. It must have been great to see everyone together there at Web Summit. So same as here in E4 Demo Day. All right. So speaking of all of our energy entrepreneurs like tuning in, do you have any like closing thoughts, panel, for these emerging energy entrepreneurs? Cyril, any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, like I said in the very beginning, the world's changed and there's so much opportunities now for entrepreneurs and new technologies. And especially in India, I mean, like, we're not going to have the energy transition without India participating. It's a gigantic market. It's a big source of emissions. And there's so much talent and capabilities in India that it absolutely has to go through that. And Third Derivative was very much involved in India. We probably had 15 some startups, that came from India, and we've been very impressed by the technologies and the innovations that we see from there.
Thanks, Cyril. Ajay, any messages you want to share to those listening?
Yeah, I think just very briefly, Amy, I think I'd say at a high level that the door is open and it's wide open. We are here to learn, we are here to listen, we are here to work together. And so please continue to remain bold, in your thinking. Don't feel constrained, in your thoughts, because we are going to need all solutions. We're going to really need radical thinking in this space. To really bring us the solutions that are going to be essential for us to kind of make this energy transition work for all.
Thanks, Ajay. And Dan, leave the final thoughts with you. Any messages for our entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think, as Ajay said, one of the things that we've been learning is humility. So recognizing that some of the best ideas come from outside, and that learner mindset to learn from startups. I think that the advice that I would give to the startups is actually the same, which is when you approach companies like Shell, have humility in the way that you do it. Because one of the things that you have to recognize is that, and one of the things that I've learned as a bit of an entrepreneur, if you like, is that there are many things which Shell does where there's good reason for it and it helps you get to scale. And so rather than thinking about this as a slow moving and frustrating entity, try and understand why. Because quite often when you understand the why, it's normally about something to do with getting to scale. And one of the big reasons where I've seen startups fail is because they've underestimated what it really takes to scale their technology. And I think if you have that learner mindset, you can learn a lot from working with big corporations about what it takes to scale. And if you can embed the key learnings from that, it can help you be more successful. And I would encourage, for that reason, any startup trying to work closely with a large corporation, because I think that symbiotic learning through openness, through learner mindset is actually really, really powerful. And when you see it working really well, Databricks, Detect, C3 AI, I know all of those you'll hear about during the E4 conference. Those different technologies are all examples of scale, but the commonality there is Shell having openness to hear from outside, and the startup having openness to learn from Shell. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really fundamental to the process of scaling.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think scaling up is definitely one of the trends that we've talked about today, and we're going to need that scale up to create the future of energy that we all hope to see. I know we could talk about this all day, and I'm really thank you, panel members, for your time and sharing your reflections. And as we explored the future of energy, I think we can definitely get there. Ultimately, it's up for us to define. So enjoy the rest of E4 Demo Day. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and hope to see you there. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Thanks all.
Thanks, Sal.
Next, we move on to a panel discussion, which is themed around investment in early stage startups and ideas from a perspective of investor, incubator, or a corporate, and how it can impact the net zero aspirations. We definitely wonder, what's the magic formula to identify an early stage idea or a startup that can probably have a paradigm impact or change on the world? And how can it do a major impact on the net zero aspirations? Well, our first panel for the day is exactly going to do that. The discussion will be centered around investment into early stage ideas, and from a corporate side of things, how do we look onto it? The conversation will be moderated by Tarun Verma, VP HR P&T at Shell, And on the esteemed panel, we have Aymeric Penwin, Director Deep Tech Acceleration at HEC Paris, Vipul Kumar, Managing Director Zentio, Dr. Marwa Ansari, General Manager Long Range Research, Neil Whitaker, Incubation Manager at Energy System Catapult, and Anandi Iyer, Director of Fraunhofer India. Once again, please feel free to put in your interesting and exciting questions in the Q&A box next to the video player. Over to you, Tarun.
And hello, everyone. I am Tarun Verma. I look after HR as the Vice President HR for Shell's Global Technology Division. And I have the absolute privilege of hosting this very topical panel discussion. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this illustrious panel that we have today. We will reflect upon early stage startups betting upon the future of energy technology and their impact on the energy transition and the roadmap towards net zero emissions future. On the panel today, I have some very esteemed guests. Let me first welcome Anandi Iyer. She is the Director and Head of the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft India office. Hi, Anandi.
Hi.
I have Aymeric Penwin, who is the Director for Deep Tech Entrepreneurship at HEC Paris. Hi, Aymeric.
Hello, Tarun, and thank you for the invitation.
We have Neil Whitaker, who is the Senior Incubation Manager for the Innovator Support Platform at Catapult Energy Systems from the UK.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you.
We have Vipul Kumar. He's the Senior Partner for Zentio in India. Hey, Vipul.
Hi. Thanks, Tarun, for having me.
And we have Marwa Al-Ansari, who's my colleague at Shell. She is the General Manager for Long Range Research and Experimentation.
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. Let me first turn to Vipul. And Vipul, if you can maybe reflect upon your views on investments in early stage startups. This is really where it's considered to be the most riskiest. The process of product or technology is still not developed. Many startups sometimes fail at this stage, especially the emerging ones that relate to the future of energy and the journey to net zero. What are some of the challenges that you have seen in your experience, Vipul?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tarun, and hello, everyone, once again. Maybe let me just start responding to your question, Tarun, just by sharing some data points on how the clean tech startup ecosystem in India is emerging. If we quickly look at more from the investment side, we had around $20 billion of investment in 2021, which is a 4 times growth from the previous year. So we do see significant interest from the capital side. Similarly, if you look at more from the startup side, as on today, we have close to 3,000 startups working on clean tech, and almost half of them are on the future of clean tech, right? So really on both sides, investors as well as startups, there is a significant interest. But having said that, as you said, there are certain challenges, and specifically with clean tech startups looking at the future tech. And I see 2 key areas of challenges. One is on the market risk, and the second is on the technology risk. Typically, the clean tech startups we are talking about need significant support on engineering for them to be able to commercially deploy those technologies. And we do see that there is a significant need for them to be able to pilot them in a near field condition, right? For them to then appear to be viable for further adoption. The second part of it is more on the market side. We need, and I think we need many progressive organizations who could potentially be also the customers of this clean tech technologies to be able to offer opportunities for commercial deployment or pilot. Because there's a lot of thinking about saying, hey, you know what, this tech could be half the cost in 5 years down the line. When everybody thinks about it, I think the deployment is going to get delayed, the scale up is going to get delayed. So I think overall, if I would summarize, I think really to solve these two challenge areas, number one, we feel that there needs to be significant partnerships between large businesses and the startup ecosystem, providing the engineering support, providing the option of commercial deployment, pilots, etc. And the second is really programs, collaborative programs, which are looking at enabling some of the levers which are more ecosystemic. So not all technologies could solve the problems that we're talking about, which are very systemic in nature. So how do ecosystemic levers get addressed through collaborative platforms? So I would think these would help address some of the challenges that exist as of today, Tarun.
Super. Thank you, Vipul. I think that's a great segue for me to move to my colleague Marva, who has, I think, a similar set of experiences. Marva, similar question from a Shell perspective. What are your experiences?
I think from Shell perspective, we have a very positive experience from learning from early stage investment in startups. As you know, navigating through the energy transition, and really, if you want to go to net zero emission in the business, we need all the efforts. We need collaboration. And one of the challenge we're facing is scale and speed. And definitely a company alone or a set of companies alone cannot do it. So we need collaboration with all the entrepreneur, the policy making, the companies, investors. All good ideas are welcomed. So I think really giving a platform where entrepreneur can actually think about what we can do for the future and the existing technology so that we can do post incremental increases as transformational, breakthroughs, technologies that will be crucial. And we can do that by startups. So my experience, whether in the US, where Shell we're having the GCXN program with NRL, where we're actually looking into the ecosystem of startups for incubating them, but also in India, the E4 as well. This is very important for us because we can see a lot of learnings. And as Vipul has mentioned, one or the two main challenges we're having, the technical de-risking. And from Shell perspective, we have expertise. We can be the future customers of these technologies or these platforms, and we can help with our experience so that we can tell what is the pain points so we can collaborate together. But also from a marketing perspective as well, Shell can offer support in that regard as well in case these companies were going to be our future collaborators.
Yeah, super. Many thanks, Marva. Let me just take us to the next question on this now. So, Neil, I'm going to come to you. You have been dealing with early stage startups, and one of the ways that we've found we can ensure that early stage startups get a better chance to really survive is to test and develop a business model through incubation. What is your organization, which is Catapult's vision around the incubation of startups, and any success story that you could share with us?
Excuse me. I think with SMEs, and it's been mentioned previously, there's two great risks that the SME has to navigate its way through. One is understanding its market, and the other is understanding its technology and developing its technology. I think the technology risk, there's some great universities, great science incubation areas in the United Kingdom for supporting the technology transition. The real risk for SMEs looking to come into the energy market is the opaqueness of the market, the challenges of navigating the market, the fact that their innovations are often disruptive to the market. And so the vision that the Catapult has is to provide the SME with business skills, to understand its position, to understand its agency, to understand its proposition, and to help the SME really navigate through what is quite a challenging space. That fundamentally enables them to understand where its partnerships might sit, what its partners' needs are, and how it can therefore bring those insights together to de-risk entering the market, to provide evidence to customers and to investors of a market need, and to really articulate what that market will do over a period of time if their technology is introduced. I also sort of bear in mind that the Catapult's aim is net zero, so we do look very much at technologies which will impact on that journey at a system level. So our vision really is to support SMEs understanding the whole system and understanding their place in it, and enabling them to bring forward the technology such that it actually has a genuine market pull. And we find that the engineering is not such a high risk. It's clearly a lot of investment to get to that, to get the engineering demonstrated and proven. But really the bigger risk is them not understanding the market needs, not understanding their partnership needs. And it's in that space that we focus our incubation support.
Thank you, Neil. That's very, very interesting insights. And maybe I'll at that point pivot to Anandi, who has been part of many intergovernmental panels and steering committees on a range of similar topics. So from a perspective of what you have seen, Anandi, if I could ask a similar question to you about incubation as a mechanism for startups.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Varun. What I feel is that, for Fraunhofer, incubation and spin-offs is not really something new. We started in the 80s with the MPEG software, as you know. And the fact that German companies are so risk-averse made us look at international partners. And I think that was an excellent learning because, like many of my esteemed panelists here have mentioned, you cannot assume that entrepreneur is going to be in a silo. He has to look at partnerships not only in the geography where he is, but across geographies, because that will give you speed. So that is one thing which we've always looked at, is to see who could be partners who have complementary skills and who can come on board quickly to enable the entrepreneur to move fast, whether he's a researcher entrepreneur, SME, coming with new technologies, or whether even if it is a large company, the problem remains the same. How do I quickly move from early stage to stage 3 or 4? The second point that we have to think about is, when you're talking early stage, what about testing? Because, scale comes at the end of the pipe. But before that, you have to know that the product is relevant for the market. It is covering a gap. And that part, in India at least, is, I think, in its very nascent stages, because we don't have testing infrastructure in India to the extent that you have in many of these developed countries. So unless your product is robust, it is testing across various spectrums, it kind of falls flat in certain geographies and certain conditions. So I think for the Indian entrepreneur, that is very important to remember, that he not only tests it here, but also tests it in other geographies to ensure that the product is robust. And the third thing I would like to mention for a success story to show you how such a thing can happen across geographies is the fact that Fraunhofer has a spin-off in solar energy called NextWav, which is a thin cell producer, and Reliance has acquired it for 25 million to deploy it in India. So this is a very complementary collaboration where technology capability has been picked up for a market capability. And, this allows the capability to come quickly into the market. And that's what entrepreneurship is all about. Not forgetting that if you are a researcher entrepreneur, then you shouldn't only be technology capable, but also understand the nuances of marketability, irrespective whether you have a partner who comes on board or not.
Thank you, Anandi. And thank you, Neil. Thank you, Anandi. Those are some really rich reflections that you've shared with us. On that, I'll take us to the next question. Emeric, let me come to you. We've just spoken about a range of topics from investments to incubation to markets, customers, geographies. Let me get a lens from a large company, university, public projects. Yeah, how do startups, how can they be nurtured by developing viable product and business models by leveraging the know-how of an incubator? You've worked with many of them. So from an institution perspective, can I hear about your experiences, please?
Yeah, thank you, Darren, for the great question. I think it's very interesting to look at that from that other perspective of what should you do as a corporate innovation program, as an incubator, as an accelerator, like what is the best way to play in that ecosystem. And I think what we try to do is really to be very pragmatic and very humble and just reminding ourselves always that this is a very big ecosystem. There are many players, many corporations playing there, many accelerators, many incubators. And in such an ecosystem, we know that it's impossible to be the best at everything. And so it really boils down to choosing as an incubator, as a program, whatever you are, choosing your precise value proposition for the company, like which is the brick that you are bringing to that big startup innovation ecosystem, on which topic are you positioning yourself, which capabilities are you bringing to a specific set of ventures. And so really refining as much as possible that value proposition, make sure that you are going to be the best in the world at this very specific topic. And when doing that, it's way easier not to get lost into the noise of the global innovation ecosystem. But it does not mean that any corporation such as Shell would have to be limited in what they can do. And what we believe is really that the solution is into building a combination of programs, with each program being precise enough and well-defined, but having the ability to combine some of them and to build kind of a path and saying, okay, you can start from this very early stage innovation studio or venture support, then graduate to a different program which is more market-oriented and practical, and another one. And if we manage to have both this very high level of specialization and this overall vision of a journey of an entrepreneur within your organization, then we have, I believe, two of the key ingredients to build something which is very visible and recognizable on the world stage.
But thank you so much, Emmerich. I'm going to pivot back to my colleague Marwa again. Marwa, you've got some experiences here, especially in terms of collaborations that you've worked on. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, thank you so much for the esteemed panelists. I think you have brought very important points, which is very relevant to Shell, and I can actually relate to all of them. And you definitely see very important aspects for all of us is collaboration and complementary set of skills. And also having this kind of market sensing, especially for your customers. And that's what we are actually, helping in Shell, because this is very, very important for us to reach the scale and the speed, to meet our targets and ambition in the negative or net zero emissions business. So, for instance, I will give you an example. We are having the E4. E4 is a startup platform in India, and we're very proud. We're having over 35 plus companies, and one of the companies called Detect Technologies, based in Chennai. And they have done an amazing job for detection for asset integrity. And because of this work, we can actually detect some of the losses for our conventional oil and gas, but also can help us for the decarbonization, because we see where we're actually having some kind of emission or leakage or something like that. I'm proud to say, like for Detect Energy, it's one of the graduates of our program, and now they're having a global framework agreement with Shell. So we're really going to provide this technology as Anandini, you mentioned, it's not just for one geography, it will be for the world as Shell as a global company. So we have a very positive experience in India and outside of India. And I think the entrepreneur has to have the stamina and the learner mindset so that they can learn, even if they fail, to learn to see how can they navigate into the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marwa. Yeah, very, very relevant one. And good to see that success story that you just shared. Now, I have the unique privilege of having such a wonderfully diverse, global, very, very different perspectives from all of you coming together on this panel. So I can't let you go without a rapid fire. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is let me first just position the kind of the question I have, and then I have kind of 2 rapid fire rounds that I'll do with each of my panelists. We are now kind of, I think, gotten down to the point that, energy transition related startups are expected to play a really key role, especially where technology is still not developed. It's early stage, requires extensive testing. I think we have discussed examples here: solar, renewables, battery tech, could be hydrogen, circularity, etc. So my first round of questions to my panelists, and maybe just 10-second responses here. From an investor's point of view, what's top on your wish list when you evaluate startups who are on their innovation journey with respect to the energy transition? If I could come to Anandi, you first.
So 2 quick things. One would be the energy that the entrepreneur brings to the table, his vision, his energy, most important. And secondly, is it a solution that is new, or is it a cut and paste from somewhere and you're trying to just give it a new spin? So those 2 things would be very important for me to look into.
Thank you, Anandi. Vipul, if I can come to you.
Yeah, I think the way I would look at it that is from the large potential opportunity space, have you been able to identify that one use case where the market is ready for your product?
Super. Thank you, Vipul. Emmerich, as an investor, what's on your wish list?
I would say that beyond the very basics like technical excellence and key, let's say, personality aspects, we've talked a lot about collaboration, so that's going to be my recommendation, like the ability to co-build a strategy and to listen to the market and to be able to have this collaborative mindset to craft their company really in collaboration with the whole value chain which is involved.
Thank you, Emmerich. Marwa.
I would repeat myself by saying all of the above of this team, the panelists, but in addition for me is speed and scale. If they can demonstrate, they can actually scale it up, because we can see a lot of things happening in the test tube, but not in when we're scaling it up, and the speed where they can actually bring the product to the market.
And Neil?
Again, echoing the panel's comments here and just really adding in around being able to demonstrate to an investor that you've got multiple touch points in the market, that your proposition has been probably sold or at least trialed in a multiple number of locations, and that the proposition is compelling. So I would be looking in that space.
Thank you, Neil. Last question from me. Again, quick rapid fire for all the early stage startups out there, the investors, and many students who aspire to who aspire to start up something on their own. One tip you want to share with them? If I can come now this time to you first, Neil.
I think it's about passion and demonstrating it and keeping going. There'll always be roadblocks, but the winners are the ones who surmount the roadblocks.
Super. Marwa?
I will say to them, stay focused, but also adopt a learner mindset, because failing, there is nothing called failing. It means learning. So learn and keep reinventing yourself and keep the passion.
Thank you, Marwa. Emmerich?
Yeah, so it seems sometimes, that we give conflicting advice by recommending to be very sharp and very narrow in proposition, and at the same time being open-minded and collaborative. So we really advise to try to define different phases where you are exploring, and then phases where you are basically in a convergent mindset and refining. So if you keep diverging and converging, you can balance this apparent dichotomy.
Thank you, Emmerich. And Vipul?
I think this is the most difficult question, but I'll step into my entrepreneur shoes, which I was 15 years back. I would say don't blindly chase capital. Focus on your value proposition. as much as you're looking for the capital is also looking for you. So focus on your value proposition, the capital will find you.
Fantastic. And let me close with you, Anandi, your top tip.
I also wear a hat of the chairperson for the women in science and entrepreneurship. So I have a word for the women students here and the potential entrepreneurs, what I call entrepreneurs. Please step up, be visible, be brave, because I think women have that extra capability of being they have a tensile strength, and that needs to be demonstrated. So don't step back, move ahead, and I'm sure we'll have more women entrepreneurs coming up.
Amazing. Thank you, Anandi. And with that, our time's up. I want to just say thank you to all my esteemed panelists for really bringing their passion, their energy, their time, their top tips.
Hi, everyone. I am Chetan Dhawan, and I work as the Investment and Portfolio Manager in Shell Ventures. We are delighted to have you with us for this panel discussion on venture investing in the clean tech space, with a focus on the emerging trends globally and in India. Clean technology, as most of our audiences here might know, is any product or service that reduces the negative environmental impacts through significant energy efficiency improvements, sustainable use of resources, or environmental protection activities. And it spans a broad range of opportunity areas, including renewable energy, recycling, green transportation, electric motors, etc. Now, before we dive into the topic at hand, let me introduce our esteemed panel members. Our first panel member is Samir Shah. He's the managing partner of Peak Ventures. Samir brings with him 28 years of global investing experience in both public and private markets. Samir began his career in venture capital after moving to India in 2014 through his private investment office, Satwa Capital. Satwa Capital has invested in over 30 companies across stages and sectors in the past 5 years. Our second panel member is Surya Prakash Konanuru. He's the CTO of Idea Spring Capital. Surya Prakash, or Suri, as you'd like us to call him, is a serial entrepreneur and a technologist. At Idea Spring Capital, which is a venture fund investing in early stage enterprise product startups, he's the CTO, as I mentioned before. And Suri has been part of the Indian startup ecosystem as an entrepreneur, mentor, advisor, and investor for the last 20 years. Our third panel member is Sailesh Salvi. He is the executive director of Xfinity Venture Partners LLP. He heads their business development and comes with over 25 years of experience in finance. Xfinity is an early stage fund focusing purely on B2B tech in the deep tech, enterprise tech, and SaaS spaces. Their overall theme is to promote startups that make products in India for the world. Now let's move ahead and hear their views on the topic at hand. If I may, Samir, it'll be great to start if you can share your thoughts on the key topic, which is what's the focus area for investors in the clean tech space? And what are the emerging investment themes that you are seeing globally and in India?
Thank you, Chetan, for giving me the opportunity to participate on this panel. If I may just add a quick comment on Peak Ventures, that we are a 100% sustainability focused fund, and we focus on 4 areas within sustainability. One is new energy, second is agriculture, third is water, and fourth is climate. So our entire business framework now actually focuses primarily on sustainability. And investing themes within these 4 verticals changes as we see opportunities in the space. Currently, where we are seeing opportunity and where we are also seeing investments in India and also globally are in the following areas. The first area which has seen a lot of investments currently is actually mobility, where in the last several months in India, you have seen a number of startups getting funded, which have been in the mobility space. Some of them represent sort of new technologies, and some of them represent sort of, I guess, a build out of, I would say, fleets in EVs, if you will. And whether it's a company which is adding 3,000 cars, or you're also seeing now private equity firms investing in large companies, as well as OEMs getting involved. as far as venture investing is concerned in the space, we have shied away from investment in companies which are essentially building more infrastructure, in the sense if you're going from 100 cars to 3,000 cars, that's not the space we function in. But we are focusing on technology. And within mobility, we see three areas which could be very interesting in the years ahead. The first is, battery management systems and thermal management, where we have invested in a company called Ion Energies, which is doing reasonably well in the space, but there's clearly scope for more companies and sort of more opportunities in the space. The second would be battery recycling, because obviously lithium and cobalt being scarce resources, the extent to which you would see more ability to recycle in the years ahead, as well as building charging stations, which would enable the mobility space to grow. In addition to mobility, the other area, Chetan, where we are seeing a considerable amount of interest is grid storage technologies. And the reason that is the case is as we see solar, wind, and other renewable assets being a bigger part of the grid, there is a serious intermittency issue, which means that effectively energy is produced when less of it is needed and not produced when more of it is needed, which is why battery technologies and long duration storage battery technologies have to be clearly coming in very handy in this regard to enable the transition to a cleaner and greener energy future. So we have been looking at zinc batteries, sodium ion, I think there's manganese batteries. There's a very interesting company that we have looked at, which is actually using the air turbine technology to see how that can be applied in various forms. So that's an area where, as a venture fund, we see a lot of growth actually coming up. The third is a comment I would make, or a word I would use, which is in the press every single day, is decarbonization. And we have, interestingly enough, there are within decarbonization spaces which are incremental and spaces which are fundamentally different. And we are trying to focus on companies which are fundamentally looking to change the architecture, how decarbonization can work. One such company is using wood or reinforced wood based out of Finland, it's the technology, trying to see how it can replace steel and cement in green buildings. So if you look at India, there are about 50% of the buildings that you will find here in 2030 are yet to be built. So that's green buildings would be a very emerging area of technology that we would see, interesting applications in. The second is decarbonization should not be only mobility. I mean, 25% of emissions are caused by agriculture. So we are seeing a lot of focus on regenerative agriculture, no-tilling technologies, basically crops which are rotation of crops and other areas which we can go into. And the last, and I'll stop here because the list can go on, but the last is energy efficiency. What most people don't realize is that the cleanest form of energy is the energy you don't use. So we generally ask companies to apply the principle of avoid, mitigate, recompensate, which is from the IFC's guidelines, to say how one should be looking at energy. And we are focused on companies which are effectively trying to improve efficiency in furnaces, companies which are using data analytics to improve efficiency in engineering processes and manufacturing processes. But every company should be focusing on looking at the entire value chain and seeing where you can conserve energy and do more with less. I'll stop here in the interest of time, but I think what I would end by saying is that energy, sustainability, clean tech is going to provide very interesting opportunities in the years ahead for investors, startups, and larger OEMs as they make the transition from a fossil fuel future to a greener future.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that, Samir. And I completely recognize a lot of the points you made there, especially on the mobility front. Shell itself has made an investment in an EV charging services company, has launched the Shell Recharge brand. So yeah, all the ecosystem, all those points to ensure that there's adoption of EVs. I guess that space is heating up and it's hot right now. But I would love to get some thoughts from other panel members here as well on where they see emerging trends and focus areas. If I may invite Suri to share his thoughts.
Hey, thank you for inviting me for this panel. And in addition to some of the points, what we have also seen is a software angle, right? Like we invested in a company called Nomosity. As the EV infrastructure gets built, software is needed to monitor and manage that infrastructure very efficiently, right? So that is another area where we have seen people actually trying to do software for managing all this. And also fast chargers is another space we have like a lot of companies trying to do fast chargers. That is one. And also apart from the energy perspective, we are also seeing other industries actually trying to be more efficient in the basically being clean energy, right, or clean tech. So some of the companies we are seeing are in say sustainable packaging is another space where companies are working on building packaging which is very sustainable, and also areas like there are a lot of pharma, right, which uses a lot of chemical processes. We are seeing startups which are actually trying to replace that with enzymatic processes, more biology, right, instead of chemistry, which actually helps in reducing the pollution in the environment. So there are a lot of multiple industries are actually trying to adopt these newer processes. Another space we have seen and invested a company called Smartship, which is digitizing the maritime industry. And maritime industry, there is a lot of governance coming in now to reduce carbon emission. So unless you measure, you cannot really manage those things, right? So pretty much there is actually a trend of adopting cleaner processes across multiple industries. That's what we have seen.
Cool. No, thank you for that. Sailesh, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, in fact, I would like to take forward the discussion what Samir has put forward. Yes, in mobility is the single largest sector wherein probably the applicability of the clean tech, I would say technology would get more and more magnified. And we have invested in 2018 as a part of our deep tech thesis into Log9. Log9 Material is a company which is basically used as a storage of clean tech energy. Whatever, as Samir has put, whatever the green energy has been produced, there has to be effective storage of that energy, because a lot of energy get, I would say, wasted while putting into the grid. There's a lot of wastages happens. So with the Log9 battery, which itself is the tenure is almost, it lasts more than 15 to 20 years, is the best solution to harness that kind of a green energy. And when it comes to clean tech, we are also investing into, let's say, another part of EV, which is basically switch reluctant motors. Because motors also, if you take the normal convention motor, which is used for IC engine, is full of magnets and full of carbon footings. So with this SRM, we can nullify that particular negative effect. And we are helping to achieve India's, I think Prime Minister Modi has already I would say, put the roadmap of by 2013, he wanted to have a net zero kind of a footings as far as India is concerned. So I think as a venture investor, we are focusing on more and more innovation. And that innovation is basically coming out of India and getting, I would say, scalable at global level.
Thank you for that, Sailesh. And clearly, as Samir mentioned, the list is never ending. The innovations are happening all over the place. And I think, Sailesh, with the point that you made, building in India for the world in some ways, and the innovation that's happening to achieve net zero ambitions, I guess that's going to be a driving force, not just for now, but for the decades to come. But now if we can shift gears a little bit and talk about early stage clean tech startups. And understanding the advice that you would want to give to them to quickly and reliably test out product market fit, especially if they're building a unique technology or innovating on a business model, and what your advice would be. If I may, Suri, would you like to kick us off on that?
Yeah, sure. See, like it's not very different from other technology companies, but I can try to see like what is more important here, right? So what we have seen is many of these clean tech startups are based on some research and deep technology, right? So, and their customers are new to those technologies and all that. So adoption is something which they have to keep looking for, right? So they need early adopters. So some of the ways actually I keep telling some of these startups is to measure whether they have reached product market fit by looking at two ways, right? One is internal and the other is external data. So internal is many times what happens is that many of these solutions work at lab scale, but not at production scale. So keep looking at, hey, is your product scalable? Like, will it work for, say, like, take water treatment, right? Like, it may work for 1,000 liters, but how well does it scale for, say, 10,000 million liters, right? So that is one thing from the product point of view, right? So that is one. And the other thing is, usually you keep looking for, see, many of these guys actually, when they do go to their customers, usually people will ask for a pilot or a customization and things like that. So I keep asking them to keep measuring what's the kind of percentage of customization which was needed. So that kind of gives idea, hey, is your product market ready, right? So that is one. And then the time taken for pilots and POCs, that's another third measure. Usually I ask them to keep looking at it, because as they go from one pilot to another pilot, they should learn and actually keep reducing that, right? So, and other way of looking at it is also it's many times is the market also ready, right? That's also another way of looking at whether my product is going to like fit the market needs and all those things. So other way of looking at it is couple of external points, right? Is the budget for my pilot or even like is the budget coming from innovation teams or is it coming from production teams? That gives you a very good idea about is the market ready to adopt your product, right? So, and also another suggestion usually I keep telling people is many of these efforts would be taken up by the clients based on, say, compliance or governance rules. Okay, that may give you a foothold into your customer, but one startup has to show financial benefits, okay, for stickiness. So keep looking for like what are the financial benefits I am giving. Those are some of the aspects which people have to keep looking for to see, hey, am I achieving product market fit, and am I achieving stickiness, and am I achieving scale? So that these are some of the points I would actually like ask startups in the clean tech space to keep looking for to see whether they have reached the product market fit.
Okay, no, thanks. And Sailesh, if I were to ask you, how do you assess startups in terms of their ability to scale sustainably?
Sure. In fact, when we look at the particular startup, we look at what are the use cases rather than what are basically the motherhood statements. A lot of founders, they use of clean tech or some sort of a thing. So ultimately, the pudding lies in what sort of use cases, what are the pain points of customers you are addressing it, and do founders have those grip of those? The precise understanding of those pain points, and how do they pitch in their product to address those those pain points, and ultimately, while addressing those pain points, the result should be in definite quantity. In numbers, how much is the cost saving or how much is the revenue augmentation. In case of Log9, the kind of cost saving is almost to the extent of 60 or 70%. And they're addressing basically they're greenifying the entire last mile delivery for all the, let's say, your Swiggies of the world or your Zomatos of the world, everywhere. So from that point of view, as long as you are addressing the customer's pain points, that is, I would say, the litmus test of a startup. And ultimately, then the second stage is when you start the roadmap to the product market fit, as Suri Saab has already mentioned. So product market fit is definitely, I would say, product market fit or product market leadership. That would give you a sort of a competitive advantage over others. So to get that kind of a things, you need to, ultimately give that kind of a cost saving or a revenue augmentation in that manifold ways, or we saying VC term is a hockey stick, there has to be a hockey stick. So the customer, there's a stickiness of the customer. The customer won't, run away with your one-time sale, and definitely it will result to your, I would say, bottom line, because ultimately, whatever technology or whatever you are innovating, it has to be accepted by the customer, and that acceptance will result only in the form of attraction or a revenue traction from those customers. So that is the ultimate pudding which we look out for any particular startups.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much for that, Sailesh. Sameer, what would your advice be to early stage startups or students who intend to start up?
So Chetan, may I just spend 30 seconds adding to what Suri has said earlier?
Sure.
Yeah. See, I think our fund, we believe that, look, climate issues are global issues and they need global solutions. So while we should build in India for the world, we should also not shy away from technologies that have worked internationally and we can bring them to India. So there's a company in Finland we have invested in where we think that the reason for the investment is to see how we can make that technology applicable to green buildings in India. So I think first I would say that, look, that needs to be balanced. And I think in terms of assisting startups in that POC stage, we have found it very useful to link a startup to a large company. In one case, it was a company doing water treatment using electrocoagulation. So we link them to a large industrial group to see how they can actually test the product. Another company which is doing plant protein, which has a much, much lower environment footprint. We're trying to link them with end users with whom they can test the intermediate. So I think Mr. Suri has said, the POC is critical in terms of how that would develop. So, in terms of your advice to startups, I think most people listening in who are running startups would already be aware with most the general statement. So perhaps I might just add a little bit more context to what it means in the space of clean tech. I think the first point I would say that the skill set required for running a clean tech startup is, while you require the skills of a general startup and in the consumer space and fintech space, this requires a combination of engineering, a combination of deeply thinking about a problem, and you're looking to scale. And it's a much more core and fundamental than running a consumer platform or a fintech company. I think I would say that the few pieces of advice that I generally speak to startups about, Mr. Suri has covered a number of it, and Sailesh as well, so I will not repeat. But the first big thing I would say is the focus. I said, have a narrower focus and then expand, and try to solve a narrower problem first and then broaden it out as you go along, trying to do too many things. Secondly, you have to keep your destination sort of in mind, but the road to it has to change, which leads to the question of pivot. I think you have to be willing to take in sort of what the market is telling you, what you learn from the POC, what you learn in discussions with customers. And engagement with customers is, in my mind, very, very critical as for a startup to listen in terms of as you grow the company. Thirdly, I think investors who come in a startup at an earlier stage, this is before as Series A, Series B, it is much more than capital that they bring. So you have to be careful in selecting who the investors are, who believe in your sort of dream, your destiny, and work with you. Because you will need guidance on strategy, you will need them to connect, you will need them to devote time in addition to the capital they invest to work with you in terms of building the company. And that's what we do with all our companies. The last thing I would say is, please raise 25% more capital than you think you need. Because the journey in a startup that is in the space of clean tech is different than you just building a platform. And I don't mean to say that the platform is easy, but this requires, it requires and it entails a higher level of uncertainty. So you would say that, look, fund yourself appropriately and stay focused. The rewards are very good if you achieve and stay focused on your journey. But there are challenges, and working with the right team of investors, customers, and team members would perhaps give you a very, a reasonable chance of being successful in the space.
Thank you. Any last closing remarks on advice for early stage startups or students, Sailesh?
Yeah, I think Samir has rightly put that, while on the road to product market fit, basically the startups has to be flexible enough to accept the pivots, because pivots is the only way where you can basically address the customer pain points. Because whatever technology you be thinking of, which is very, I would say, magnanimous and very sexy, as long as there is no customer acceptance, there is no use of that particular technology. So pivot is a part and parcel of your startup journey, and always welcome those pivots. And through pivots only you can get your POCs, your first customer, and your customer traction.
Thanks, Suri.
I think Samir and Shailesh covered most of it, but I'll just try to cover it in my own way. Okay, so and since you said students also, so I would say choose an area you're very passionate about, have a dream, and pick a big enough problem. Okay, because that's very important. And build a team to solve the above problem, because a lot of times people think they can solve it on their own, but it's not possible, right? Build a team, and as Samir and Shailesh mentioned, listen to your customers, pivot, iterate, all that. On top of all this, actually, I would say enjoy the journey. Okay, that's very important. And that's why I think like I would end with like, enjoy the journey. So that's.
Thank you so much for that. Sorry.
So Chetan, I was just saying, do you have 15 seconds more for a last comment from you?
Sure.
I think there has been a lot, this is a broader comment, that there is a lot of discussion on net zero. But the dialogue on climate has to move away from net zero to a broader focus on natural capital, which includes sort of waste management, water utilization, land use change, pollution, and other areas. I think the overemphasis on net zero for GHG emissions is moving into a buzzword and almost a race to net zero. But I guess I would just like to kind of present to the audience that the broader natural capital issues should not be ignored in the quest for moving to net zero on GHG.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. It was a very insightful discussion here. Thank you for your time. And in terms of our audience, clearly lots to take away from this, including the sectors that investors are seeing. A lot of innovations happening in. To what should you look for when you're trying to deploy and scale your business, to actually having the passion to really love what you're doing and enjoying the journey, being very clear what kind of supporters do you want to bring on your journey, what kind of investors do you want to bring on, how do you test this out, how do you build your proof of concepts. So yeah, clearly lots happening, bustling space, and clearly there's a great ecosystem here. So please reach out, and we wish you best on your journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Chetan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ajay Mehta, Vice President Engineering Technology at Shell Technology Center, Bangalore, here in India. What an amazing and stimulating day it's been. It's truly been a privilege to listen to all these thought leaders and bold entrepreneurs describe their vision for the future and how each of them will play a role in shaping the energy transition. This is energy entrepreneurship in action, as we listen to how these thoughts and ideas will translate into solutions that will impact the lives of millions of people. On day one, we heard of digital and artificial intelligence technology solutions that will play a pivotal role in developing new ideas that will embed themselves across the full spectrum of solutions in the energy transition journey. On day two, we heard of energy entrepreneurship and especially the role of startups, as well as how they will scale solutions that will be required to do things on a much, much larger canvas to cater to the needs of the energy transition of the globe. This is really what we need to attain our collective goals of sustainability, including the role of low carbon technologies. I hope that you've been inspired as much as I have been by listening to this interplay between these entrepreneurs and stakeholders. Each one of us has a role to play in this energy transition, and today has been evidence of how connections like this can help us each work with each other to play our role in the energy transition as a whole. With that, I'd like to end with a vote of thanks to a few special people, starting with yourselves. So thank you for being part of this journey with us. Thank you to our speakers, panelists, and partners. Thank you to our amazing organizing team. And thank you for making the E4 Demo Day a success again this year. It's been a privilege to have you all, and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you.